I'm Greg Sumner. I am history professor here at University of Detroit Mercy, and I am also co-chair of the history department.
And so you've recently written the new book, Michigan POW Camps
Yes,
in World War II.
Very proud of it. This is my fourth book, actually. I'm sort of a masochist or a glutton for punishment, but I've always enjoyed writing in words, and I have to have some interesting topic to write about. I got a call about 5 years ago from the History Press, which does local histories. And they said, we got a book on Baltimore in World War II. We got a book on Pittsburgh in World War II. Would you like to write a book on Detroit in World War II? Before they finished the sentence, I said, I'll take it. So suddenly, this Hoosier boy starts writing, and I wrote a book on Detroit in World War II for the History Press. They liked it. The public liked it, and they said, you got any more ideas? And I said, yeah, I do. I noticed when I was researching the Arsenal of Democracy story that there were Italian POWs held at Fort Wayne down by the river. And I thought, what an interesting story. I didn't know there were prisoners of war in Michigan. And I suggested it to them, and they said, run with it. So we did a second book, which is like a nice companion to the first. I'm really interested in World War II, all the human stories within that incredible, terrible, tragic situation, but lots of drama and stories. I discovered on a little bit more research that there were about 6,000 prisoners of war in Michigan during the Second World War. Germans mostly, but also Italians, like at Fort Wayne. And they were brought over, we treated them well. The United States followed the Geneva Convention. There was a national program of over 400,000 that they brought over. And they could volunteer for work. And they did a lot of agricultural work. And so in Michigan, there were about 6,000 Germans and Italians. And they cut trees in the Upper Peninsula. They picked fruit down in Berrien County. They harvested sugar beets in the Thumb. They did all kinds of labor at a time when there was a great labor shortage. And they got paid a little marginal, little bit of a token compensation. And it's a good story because they tried to get the bad guys out. They were Nazis and fascists. They tried to send them to high security places. Most of the 6,000 in Michigan were just young guys, kind of homesick, who worked hard and just wanted to go home. And in many cases, they behaved well for the most part. In many cases, they formed friendships with the people that they worked for, farmers and their families, people in communities who they were exposed to. And so many of them were so pleased with how they'd been treated. They were it wasn't lavish. They lived under Spartan circumstances. But they were so well treated that many of them, when they had to be sent back home, repatriated, said, I want to come back someday. And many of them came back and became American citizens. So it's a story about us treating these guys well. Yankee ingenuity, where are we going to keep them? There's a place to take them, and also to fill our labor shortage. But it's also, we're the United States. We're supposed to treat people with humanity, and we did in this case. And so these are the ideals that our men and boys were fighting for around the world, and we actually were one of the few countries to follow the Geneva Convention. So it's a good story, and it's loaded with a lot of funny and also poignant human stories. So it's got all the bells and whistles that I, as a writer, like. It almost wrote itself.
So you have a big theme of a positive nature of it
Mm-hmm.
due to how history worked,
Mm-hmm.
and you also are bringing in the idea of humanitarianism.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an idea or a story that symbolizes it more than any of the others?
Mm-hmm. There are many great moments. One of my favorites, it's very poignant to me. There was a German camp, a tent camp outside of Sparta, Michigan, which is north of Grand Rapids. Germans, about 300 of them. They were brought to pick apples and fruit and so forth during the harvest season. And right across the street from the camp, I read about this. I got it secondhand, but I think it's a wonderful story that talks about this humanity theme. Right across the street was a house where the Lamoureux family lived. And the mother, Alice Lamoureux, she could look out her front window and see those Germans getting on and off their trucks going to work every day. And they were there. Well, everybody noticed they had 3 blue stars in their front window, indicating she had 3 boys in the service. Well, over the course of several months, they had 1, 2, 3 of them turned to gold stars, meaning her 3 sons were all killed in combat at various places. And everybody knew it. When you had the gold stars on your window, that means you lost somebody. And so the townspeople were nervous, like, what's it going to do to her to be looking at these enemy combatants across the street? And her 3 sons got killed. Well, it turns out her daughter later said, my mother was a strong lady. She never had an ounce of bitterness toward these young guys. In fact, she sent over cookies and little food items and, waved at them. She was very sociable to them. And they responded in kind, because one day when they noticed that the Germans noticed that the 3rd star had turned to gold, they knew what that meant. So that week, they're coming back in the afternoon. They're getting off the truck, and a group of them separated from the rest and marched over to stand in front of the house under the porch, wearing their uniforms. And they gave a long, solemn military salute in honor of and one of the Germans, they went back then. One of the Germans was asked, why did you do this? And he said, well, we have mothers too. And sometimes they lose 2, 3 children. We understand and we appreciate everyone who, makes sacrifice. So here's a universal thing. This woman's lost three sons, and these guys recognized it. And without any planning they just did it, took it upon themselves to show respect and to pay their respects. And it's a beautiful moment. And when I actually read the excerpt, I do a lot of talks on the book at libraries. And every about 3rd time I read that little section, I get choked up reading about it. It's quite a beautiful story. But I got funny stories, inept guards who took naps all the time because the security was very minimal. Drinking with the guys. 2 girls in Owasso, Michigan, helped their German boyfriends escape for 12 hours, and they were put on trial for, they went to federal prison for it. Little escape attempts. The overarching story, and it's one that is in all of my books, and I guess it spins my wheels, is human beings will respond humanely when they are approached that way, for the most part. I don't care what your nationality, race, religion is. Unless you're just a bad person and hate and or racist if you get to know people, you begin to see them as people, and that's really the German and the Italians. By the way, were really happy to be in America and in Michigan. They were out of the war. They didn't want to be there in the first place. They surrendered in North Africa by the tens of thousands. And they came, I got a cousin lives in Buffalo. They were very happy to be here, and they were at Fort Wayne. So that's it.